Coming up on Work It Out with Lauri, today we're covering a big topic, grievances, HR, and DARVO.
Join us for that and much more.
Howdy, WBP crew. Welcome to Work It Out with Lauri, the no-nonsense show for anyone navigating workplace bullying, chaos, or straight-up dysfunction. I'm Lauri Lilly, your host, workplace anthropologist, survivor of workplace abuse, and the founder of the Workplace Bullying Project. I'm here to help you make sense of all the drama you're experiencing at work.
And I'm Cosmo Esplin, Sir Showrunner and your backstage guide, directly providing Lauri with your questions and workplace dilemmas so you get the practical solutions you need. Each episode will be a short-form podcast tailored to a specific topic and clarified thanks to Lauri's expertise. So what do you say? Let's work it out. Welcome, everyone, to the second episode of the Work It Out with Lauri podcast. We're very excited that you have joined us once again. I'm excited to continue working with you, Lauri Lilly, founder of the Workplace Bullying Project. How you doing, Lauri?
Thanks, Sir Showrunner. We're really excited to get into a big topic today. Let's do it.
This is our first show where you are going to be answering a question directly from someone who submitted it through your website. This is going to be kind of the formula for the show moving forward, is basically one question, one answer per episode. So let's get into it. So this is a question that comes anonymously. This person says, quote, "Please discuss how a person can address a situation where the person is blamed as the common denominator of multiple complaints versus the company taking accountability for responding to multiple good faith complaints about a toxic boss work culture." What's your instant reaction to hearing that comment, and what do you make of it?
This is a big ticket item.
I love big ticket items.
There's a lot to unpack here. There's multiple layers. And also, we don't have all of the information, right? We have enough to know that it sounds like a couple of complaints have been made. My assumption is that they were made via HR, human resources, and it sounds to me like this process has not gone well for the individual, for the complainant, okay? And that they are now being blamed as, quote unquote, the common denominator. There's so many different things to unpack here. Mr. Showrunner, Sir Showrunner.
Showrunner, yes.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to start from step number 1. Can't believe we're getting into this on episode number 2. We have to talk about HR. Something has gone awry in our understanding of the role of human resources, and I actually think it's evolved over time. What happens is human resources, for lack of a better word, they are grooming us from day one. When you start a job, what's the very first thing you do? You meet with human resources, okay? Now you're going to start doing all of the training videos, the anti-harassment, the anti-bullying, if they have an anti-bullying policy, right? You do all of these trainings and you're lots of talk about HR, all of the documentation and all of your materials that you have to, all the signatures, they're through HR. And we start to see them as this go-to resource, human resource, that, gosh, when anything's going awry at work, where do we go? Human resources. I'm here to tell you, they are not your therapist. They are not your go-to buddy when things are going awry. They protect the interests of the company. Human resources is part of a system designed to protect the employer from liability and to ensure legal compliance. In the context of bullying, what happens is people get bullied and bullied and bullied, and it's awful. On a day-to-day basis, it's soul-crushing, but there's oftentimes what I call a dehumanizing event that goes beyond the standard run-of-the-mill belittling comment, the humiliation rituals, whatever it may be. The threshold has been met. It's at this moment that individuals who are being bullied, they're seeking relief. desperation starts to set in. And I really don't like that word desperation, but I'm here to tell you, when you're being bullied and you need someone to intervene, the most obvious resource is who, sir showrunner?
Human resources?
That's right.
All right.
And
$200
right.
I'm on the board.
And so in this very emotional state, and I'm not saying that this is the case of this particular comment that came in through the website. I'm saying this is, generally speaking, kind of what happens, is in this desperation for relief. Someone please intervene and stop this absolute insane abuser. They go to HR. It is at this point, whether or not the individual is aware of it or not, there is a very serious escalation in your situation. Going to HR is an escalation point. Period. What I always tell people how to think about HR is think about them in terms of an overall strategy for your situation. And you also have to think about the fact that they are an escalation point. And you also have to think about the fact that it is a risk. When you go to HR, you are now engaging in a very risky decision that can lead to very negative consequences for you in a couple of different ways. One, you're going to get involved in an escalation here that can potentially lead to placing your livelihood at risk. It doesn't happen right away. It often isn't just, go to HR, and the next day you're on a performance improvement plan. However, I'm here to tell you, in no uncertain terms, this happens.
It might be a slow burn, though.
Yes. There's all kinds of different scenarios, and the idea behind this podcast is to be short form. So this topic alone, I could have a 3-hour discussion on it. But for the purpose of this discussion, if you submit a grievance, there is an art and a science to writing a grievance. I want to be very careful because I don't want people to think I'm assuming everyone is just an emotional mess, but I've been bullied. And I understand when you're at that point of seeking help from human resources, it's gotten pretty ugly at this point. And writing a grievance requires a lot of time and effort. It requires strategy. And you have to kind of throw the entire kitchen sink at it in a very unique way. So I don't have this particular grievance in front of me. I don't know how it was written. I don't know the details of it. All we know is that this person, whoever wrote this grievance, is engaged in some form of a back and forth with human resources, and now they're being blamed. This is absolutely common. Human resources is never, ever going to acknowledge or be, the word that bullies and their sponsors are allergic to. What's the word? They're never going to be accountable. They are never going to be accountable for the bully's behavior, because then what? Liability. Potentially having to enact some change. Bullies are sponsored. If you are in an organization where there is bullying, you have imposter leadership at the helm, and they sponsor this behavior. They enable it and they allow it through their lived values on a daily basis. So I'm here to tell you the key word in this message that came down that says it all: blamed. Okay? The target is always going to be blamed, and they're going to be blamed through something called DARVO. And if you all do not know what DARVO is, I'm here to tell you DARVO stands for deny, attack, reverse the victim and offender. So what are we learning here? Okay, we're learning that sure enough, they've probably been through multiple rounds of discussions with HR. They have probably been through a very painful process that has led to harm. And I'm going to talk about that harm in another minute here. So what they've done here, this HR or whomever is responsible for the grievance on behalf of the employer, they have found a way to make the target the bully.
My instant reaction to what you said regarding HR is that Michael Scott called it. Obviously, Michael Scott was infamously Not a big fan of Toby Flinderson in the HR cubicle.
No! No! No!
So, I guess you're in the anti-Toby crowd. I'm sorry to hear it.
You know what? That's such a great point. It's hard because I firmly believe that there's wonderful people in HR who are really just doing their jobs. There's a fundamental misunderstanding of the role of HR. So, as it relates to bullying, absolutely, I'm anti-HR. We do not have a proper solution in place for interventions for people who are being bullied. And quite frankly, one of those is the fact that not a lot of people understand psychological abuse and bullying. They simply don't. Additionally, as a result of that, as a result of the lack of accountability, the DARVO, et cetera, targets who are seeking relief end up experiencing what's called secondary abuse. And for those of you who are not aware of what secondary abuse is, this is when someone who's a target of abuse seeks support, someone to intervene, help, anything. And instead of getting that compassionate and empathetic response, that care and concern and a willingness to help and potentially intervene, instead, they get gaslighting, crazy making, absolute denial, and victim blaming through use of DARVO. And there is more harm as it relates to this.
What would you say is the actual solution? What does this person need to do to get over the HR hurdles, and whatever other obstacles are keeping them from achieving success in this department?
Number one, you're being gaslit. This person is being gaslit, assuming that they've come with a fair amount of documentation of their experience, and the chances of a positive outcome for the target, again, it's not high. Okay. But what you can do is you can get it recorded that you disagree with their findings. And I would do that by some form of a response. I have a resource that I developed. It talks about the various phrases that emotional arsonists use to gaslight people. And I have this, and I'm going to read it. This is one of the responses I have. Of course, it's sounding fairly formal. You'd have to take it and tweak it, but something to the effect of, I'm confident in what I experienced, and I'd like to understand the investigative process in detail and the evidence you have gathered that's brought you to the conclusion that I am the
Common denominator.
that I am the common denominator in this situation. Given my history of being maybe describe a few things about yourself, whether you're well-liked, collegial, respectful, in all of my professional relationships. Quite frankly, this sounds like victim blaming in the form of DARVO, which is unethical and a common response that abusers and enablers use to invalidate the experience of the person who has been abused. Let's discuss your process and findings in detail because I know my experience was real.
Good place to start
Yeah.
for people in that situation.
The harder you push, remember, you are now using resources of the organization and you're not conforming to the system, right? And how they want you to engage at work. They're completely okay with the behavior of the bully. That's what they're telling you. So you have to kind of take that, have a little bit of a hardcore moment with yourself and some radical acknowledgement that there might be a values mismatch here. And I always tell people, and I always tell the folks I work with, at any point, you can decide you don't want to push it any further. You don't want to go any further, and you can stop the process. And I say that because my goal is always to minimize the harm, help my clients and those who are being bullied minimize the harm related to psychological abuse. And when you're pushing in a system that's telling you the bullying behavior is okay, and you're getting victim blamed, you're going to experience secondary abuse. Tough question. This is a tough question, and actually I could probably speak on it for another 30 minutes because there's so much more. I think it's a fantastic question, and this is a common problem for targets. Why I talk a lot about risk. What risk are you willing to take to your livelihood? What risk are you willing to take to your health and wellness, your mental health, your physical health. Because when you push in a system that's designed to protect the bully and the organization, there's going to be harm. It's just about how much are you willing to withstand. And that's why we'll talk more as we have more questions coming in about using HR strategically. That's why I don't want to be anti-HR. They serve a purpose in very specific situations. There's a lot of people scream from the mountaintop, never, ever, ever go to HR. And I actually respectfully disagree with that particular position. As much as we know about HR, there are specific times when going to HR and submitting a complaint, particularly if you think there's legal involvement. For example, if somehow the bully managed to get some really, really damning performance review or some sort of a warning or something that's going to stick on your record for some time, and it's going to handcuff you from a promotion or going elsewhere in the organization as a whole, then these are times when you want to have a serious think about whether or not you want to engage with HR. I want to be very clear. It's strategic.
So in closing, giving the bullet points version, basically, HR serves the interests of the company, not you. You need to find a way to work through these obstacles and show very clearly that the falsehoods that you are not the common denominator.
That's right. You have your grievance. If you go this route, there's a specific formula for it that maybe we can get into in another day. This isn't the time, though.
And third and final bullet point, that if you really need strategic help, check out more resources from the Workplace Bullying Project.
That's right.
Worked in that plug seamlessly. I have to pat
Well
myself
done.
on the back there. There's a lot of great stuff, free or paid, for people to look into on LinkedIn on your website. So,
And I'm in the process of developing a lot of new resources that I think are going to be very impactful and helpful for people who are being bullied. So I will be sure to make those announcements as they're ready, but hopefully this was helpful. Thank you to this anonymous individual for sharing this question. It was a really big one for our first question, and there's so much more to say about it, but this gives us a foundation to work from.
yeah, so Lauri's going to continue to answer your questions in typical Lauri style, giving her firsthand expertise as a workplace anthropologist and founder of WBP. So if you want your question answered, drop it into the website, workplacebullyingproject.com. You can click on the subpage there and provide your question anonymously with a pseudonym, with your real name, whatever you want. It's a great way to get your questions answered on the air and provide help to other people. So thank you for answering this question, Lauri.
Thank you, sir, showrunner. Thanks so much for tuning in to Work It Out with Lauri. If today's episode hit home at all, please share it with someone who needs it. And please remember, you deserve to work in peace. Oh, and hey, if you're listening and you're currently a target of a workplace bully and you need help, please feel free to schedule an initial consult with me. It's completely free and completely confidential. I've got your back.
And remember to follow this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Substack. Plus, send us your story or your question at workplacebullyingproject.com.
We'll see you next time, and we'll work it out together.